Welcome to the tutorial of bubbles. Basically it's about metaball objects. Metaball objects are found right here. It's also called blobby surface. And basically anything you throw into the metaballs will change into metaballs. And metaballs is translating the objects into bags of marbles. Now, for instance, I don't know if this is set correctly, but if I introduce a cube and I chuck it into the metaball object, it completely disappears. That wasn't my point, but let's put down the hull value. I'll explain what that is later. And now I get basically 8 blobs here. They don't have a very good resolution because they're very low poly. Let's turn this down to 5, just like the render subdivision, and you get these beautiful bars. You can do that with balls, of course, and any kind of object, even an object like a Bezier curve consisting of one point. That's it. And I can just throw that in there and it will change into a metaball. And what you see here is that it blobs together. Now, in the metaball object, you see this hull value. It's basically the tension of the bag. So if you put that up, you see that my computer has major problems with it. You put it up, the bag tightens, and basically the space is compressed. Now, if you use metaballs in combination with particles, it becomes really interesting. Let's take out the spline and let's go to simulate and ask for an emitter, and let's just say that that emitter is very tiny and it spreads the particles horizontally all the way around 360 and half a dome 180, but multiplying that, it basically spreads it out all over the place. It shows up like this, right? And if we put in the spline, so that's going to be my particle now. I'm going to show particles, and we drop that whole entire thing into the metaball object. You get this splash of water, well, splash of blobby particles. Sorry, I call it water, but it doesn't look like water. The more particles, of course, the more effect you get. And in other tutorials, I told you about what you can do with particles and forces and stuff like that. Now, the last thing I want to tell you, and then I want you to use your creativity with the assignment, is materials. And these materials that you put on the blobby surface have to be a little bit exuberant. What I really like is, for instance, in the color channel, I'll use the Frasol, and this basically, if I switch off the reflectance, this looks kind of odd. I was expecting to just see a black dot with a white outline. What it does is it looks through the camera, and if it hits the surface basically at a 90-degree angle, it will show up black. If it hits the object and it's actually an angle that's well, let's say just more than 90 degrees, let's say that it basically scrapes the surface around the edges, for instance, then it turns to white. So if I just put this on the I should put it on the metaballs, I get something like this, which looks pretty cool. You can fiddle around with this, and you can use it, for instance, with transparency. And let's just copy this. So I copied the whole channel with the Fresnel, and I'll go over to transparency, and I just plop that in there. So I do paste channel, and now I get transparency around the edges. We can turn that around by just switching the gradient from white to black to black to white, and I get something like this. So basically transparent bubbles, but the edge is really hard and non-transparent. Now, another thing you need to consider is that there's no surroundings, there's no background. So if you want to have reflectance and reflectivity, then you have to put texture in the environment. Now, I have a lot of textures. I'm just putting this HDRI image into this slot and put the anti-aliasing down, and now it becomes, well, if it was there, that is. Now it becomes way more vibrant because it has reflections of surroundings that are absolutely fake. So this looks pretty cool, and you can do stuff with luminance, basically the same thing. And let's put in luminance with an effect called the fall off, and let's just keep the default. So it starts from the top, yellow, red, and black, and it also looks at the angle of the surface. So if the angle of the surface is nearly straight at the top, then it will turn yellow to red to black at the bottom. So you get something like this. Let's switch the color off. You can see better. So something like that. Of course, you can change the vector. The vector is basically the direction of this ramp, how it's going to go through space. No, it's going to through local space, and it's going down from the top down, because the y is 1. If I wanted to get it from an angle from the left or the right, I have to put in, for instance, minus 0.5, and this will change the angle over to the left, and stuff will come out more yellowy on this side. Basically, that's it. I mean, play around with the particles, play around with the shaders, try to come up with something interesting, have a plan ahead of time so that you know what you're going to do, and make a nice bubble animation.